Amy, are we going to do the prayer?
Oh, yeah, that was in a different spot. Sorry. We'll go ahead and start with
yeah, that's the crazy thing. I have not changed it.
Someone's got to push that closer to her.
Our Father in heaven, we pause at the beginning of our school board meeting and express thanks and gratitude unto Thee for Thy blessings. And we acknowledge Thy hand in our lives and in blessing and protecting our community. Father, as we are in the midst of this coronavirus, we express thanks unto Thee that so many have been protected from illness, and so grateful that those who have contracted this disease, especially our students and teachers, have recovered and are in good health. And we pray, Father, that Thou wilt soften the effects of this virus within our community and especially within our schools. And we ask Thee to bless us as we move forward, that we might be blessed with wisdom and good judgment as important decisions are made by this board and by the administration. And we pray for understanding and unity as we move forward and try to do the best we can. And knowing the effects of the virus and how it has interrupted our daily routines. We acknowledge Thy hand, Father, and express our gratitude for all that we have, for this wonderful community, for the students who attend school here, and especially for our teachers and administrators, and pray for Thy blessings to be upon them. And we ask and pray for these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Mary, for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Dams, for the prayer. I'd just like to welcome everybody out to our board meeting tonight. If there's anybody who is here that would like to speak to the board during the public input portion of our meeting, there's a clipboard just right outside the doors right here, and we would need you to sign your name to that if you're wanting to speak with the board during that portion of our meeting. And for those who are on our meeting right now via Facebook or on the district webpage, you can also participate in the meeting and be heard tonight. If you would just go to the www.93schools.org and then go to the school board tab, and you will see a public input section under there so that you can email our board clerk and get into our meeting tonight. And also, due to the sensitive nature of the public input portion of our meeting, complaints about personnel or individual students must be submitted in accordance to Board Policy 4112, Uniform Grievance. Grievance forms are found on the district's home webpage, also under the School Board tab, and then Board Policies. All right. So we would need a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Calder.
My second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Jenkins. All in favor? Aye. And then, looking over the consent calendar, is there any board member who would like to remove anything and put it on the regular agenda?
Make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar by Mr. Jenkins. It's been seconded by Mr. Calder. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
Amy, could you repeat that?
Yeah, there was a motion to approve the consent calendar by Mr. Jenkins and a second by Mr. Calder.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We have got somebody here a couple people here that we're going to recognize tonight. I'm super excited to hear about Craig Miller and wanted to turn the time over to Principal McLaren.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members and Dr. Wilson. We appreciate this opportunity. It seems like a long time ago we nominated Craig Miller for this award, but I want to talk a little bit about that process and how we decided to do that. Of course, Craig's a great guy, but I want you to realize the strange position that being an assistant principal is. You're required to be your own man or woman and to make decisions on your own, whether supporting student discipline, supporting student learning, being an academic and an instructional leader, supporting the activities that go on in the building. But in a lot of ways, you also have to take direction and do and follow direction of the school and kind of fall in line that way. And so it's a unique position where you make a lot of decisions, but then you have a lot of decisions made for you as well. And Craig marries those two things wonderfully well. Very smart, very intelligent, very helpful to the culture and to the atmosphere at Thunder Ridge and to all schools that he's been at. When we received the notice of that they were doing the assistant principal and accepting nominations, assistant principal of the year, the three other administrators and our AD and even some teachers said, hey, yeah, we need to get this, we need to get Craig nominated. It was just unanimous. And some things that I wrote about Craig in his letter of recommendation, just that he is 100% supportive of everyone in the school environment. It doesn't matter if a student has really messed up and done something really stupid, he's going to make a difference for that kid. Or we have the best teacher in the world, he's going to do everything he can to make sure that teacher is supported and is able to do her job or his job to the best of their ability. And I think that's what makes a good administrator, is just being there to support and do the things that are needed. And so it's very easy to write a letter of recommendation, very easy to nominate Craig. And if you don't know what the nomination process is, it actually requires Craig to do a lot of work. It was pretty easy for us to nominate him, but then he had to go through it. He had to really reflect on his profession and the job that he does and put those into words. And then he has to be interviewed by the IASA board, and he goes through that process, answers their questions, and then he kind of got a raw deal this year. Most of the time, the assistant principal of the year has the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and participate in the Assistant Principal of the Year conference. And because of COVID, he wasn't able to do that. They invited him to do something virtually, I think, but that's probably not quite the same as going to D.C. But he got a little bit of a raw deal there, but he is absolutely deserving of this award. And I think the thing that I can say about Craig that means the most to me, I certainly appreciate his friendship. There's a lot of times I go to his office and vent or ask his advice on things. And I think the best thing I can say about Craig is that he makes Thunder Ridge a better school. He makes our students more successful than they'd be without him there. And he makes our teachers better teachers because he's there. And so this is a very well-deserved award for Mr. Craig Miller. So hopefully he can come up and accept that.
I guess I'll say thank you. It's great to work for a great district, great people. Doug's a great mentor to me and a great help to me. And it's great to work for this district and all the support and the amazing things that we do as a group. Thank you for your support.
And Craig, I just want to tell you, you're just awesome. I appreciate your friendship over the years and your honesty and the integrity that you have as an individual, and we have a lot of respect from the people in our community and in our schools. And anyway, we just appreciate you so much. So
I work with great people. It makes my job easy. So.
Well, we have a certificate for you as well. And normally we'd have you walk across the stage, but this whole COVID thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Craig.
All right. We also have a student here that we're going to be honoring tonight. Is Julie and Duffy here? There you are. I don't know who anybody is with masks on in here.
The best part is I think Craig and I are pretty similar in size, but Doug had adjusted the microphone. Moving all over. So probably the easiest thing is that I don't get to say much of anything because I'm going to probably to their fear, I'm going to recommend that Christy Pinnock and Jenny Brasto come down and introduce their award nominee. And Nikki, I see you're there as well. You probably should come too. Socially distanced as necessary. What it is, there's the Council for Exceptional Children, and every year they have an annual series of awards. And there is the Yes I Can Award that's specifically set aside for students. And in this case, there was a statewide nominations, and our good, fantastic team at Cloverdale nominated their students. So I'll let them take it from here.
This is Caden Sargent. Say hi to everybody. And he's been in our special ed program at Cloverdale since kindergarten. And Mrs. Pinnock and I have both worked with him. And when Caden first started out, do you want to talk about his language?
Caden was really difficult to understand. He couldn't understand what he was saying when he first started in kindergarten. And he just really is a hard worker, and he just works really hard at learning those sounds and articulating and learned to read at a pretty typical pace, even though he had a speech thing going on with him. And he's just a really hard worker, and he just did a great job. And we eventually got to exit him out of the academic part of his IEP, so.
Exactly. He came to see us for reading and writing and math, and exited all three. He still receives his language services, but I don't know for how much longer. And the other thing that really impressed all of us was the support of Caden's family. His older sister Abigail, they walk to school together, they walk home together. One doesn't leave without the other one. And I know that Mom and Dad have been really instrumental in just saying, yes, you can do this. Right, Kaden?
Yes.
You can do this. And we are so proud of you. You want to say anything?
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
And Caden, I have an award for you if you want to come up here.
I will point out Dad's in the back too, so we stand up to a family because it's a team effort, and we don't have a ton of time, but at the CDC conference, Dad got to pop up and say some things. There wasn't a dry eye in the entire place, so thank you so much for all your support, and thank you for Cloverdale.
And as board members, thank you for working so hard and for helping him to be able to advance from an off of his IEP. That's pretty huge. Appreciate that. Thank you. We're so glad that you guys were able to come, Caden. Thank you. All right. And for those of you who would like to leave the meeting, if you would like, you're more than welcome. And you're more than welcome to stay if you would like to continue on. But we're going to go ahead and invite our CFO, Guy Wainsgard, to present about our transportation supervisor.
Thank you. Over the past year or so, as I've had several conversations with our current transportation supervisor, Mike Graham, thoughts have been toward retirement for a while, and he has decided to move forward with that. And so tonight on the consent calendar, you accepted his retirement, and so he will be retiring and joining the world of Percy retirees on December 1st. We've had the great opportunity to go through a process to evaluate and select our recommendation for the next transportation supervisor. If you'd come down, Pam, I know some of you know her, some of you may not know her, but want to make sure that you know who she is. Pam has been with the school district for 25 years, and there's probably not much in the transportation department area that she does not know, or if she doesn't, she can find out very quickly. As I've gotten to know Pam over the last little while, very impressed with the humor she has. She's able to laugh when she can. It's also very personal for her when things don't go exactly right. And as you well know, we've struggled a little bit since school opened. But she has been able to hold things together, and we just really look forward to working with her and continuing to do great things in transportation. So it's our recommendation that Pam be hired as, so with the way the timing would work, she would become the acting transportation supervisor as of November 1st, and then become the transportation supervisor as of December 1st.
Could you repeat those dates?
November 1st as the acting director of transportation, and then December 1st as the director of transportation.
Pam, I know Mike and yourself, you guys just have got a really tough job. There's so many parents that typically when you get the phone calls, they're not the happy ones. And you guys deal with a lot of unhappy people. And you guys, I think, have just done a phenomenal job. Even though, yes, we've had some hard times at the beginning of this year, we didn't have enough drivers. And I understand that your office staff has been driving every day, including your mechanics.
Yes.
And a huge thank you for that. That's just so much more than what your job is. So I just appreciate that, and if you will let your staff know as well from our school board.
I will.
Thank you.
It is an awesome district. We want to please and prove that we can do a great job for a district director.
Yeah, and I know that we've had some tough times not being able to bus our secondary students, but I think overall there's just a minimal amount of complaints compared to what they could be. And
we're hoping they appreciate us more. No, you can't.
I think we're all hoping that for different things. But we appreciate you and are so grateful to have your team and your staff. If you could just tell them thank you for everything that they're doing.
I definitely will.
Appreciate it. Our board needs to have a motion on whether or not to approve the recommendation for Pam to be the transportation supervisor. So we would need a motion.
I would move that Pam be given the position of transportation supervisor. Honorable Joint School District 93.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Jenkins.
I second that.
It's been seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Or condolences. Thank you. All right. We're going to move into the public input portion of our meeting. And we're going to have Mary go ahead and check our emails to see if we have any public input on the emails. And if somebody could bring up onto the stage the clipboard. Is there nothing on there? Okay. So pursuant to Board Policy 4105, public participation in board meetings, public input shall be held maximum of 1 hour and provide an opportunity for board members, administrators, staff members, students, or patrons to raise issues of interest. The board will receive such input without comment except to ask germane questions of those speaking. Comment should be limited to 3 minutes. The board will take no action relative to any of the items during the meeting, but may direct the superintendent to consider such an item at a subsequent meeting. So I do know that we had one person on the emails that wanted to speak tonight. Are there others, Mary?
No, there are no other ones.
And on the one that we had Broken Loft who wanted to join us via Zoom to make some comments. And I don't know if Broken can hear the meeting right now.
So we were having some network issues with Zoom. So I just sent him the link. We may want to just move on and then he may be able to join.
Okay. And so we don't know if he's even
Yeah, I just sent
watching
an
the
email
video.
30 seconds ago. I'll just watch and see if he's able
Okay.
to join.
Okay, if he gets on, Scott, will you just call it?
Yeah.
And then we'll go ahead and move into that. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward until we hear from Mr. Loft. And so, Dr. Wilson-Hume, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to you for the report of the state of the district.
Thank you, Chairman Landers. So just want to give the board some updates on how things are going. I think all in all, things are going remarkably well, but we're certainly starting to see some of the challenges that we anticipated when we knew that reopening schools wouldn't come necessarily all that smoothly. So first of all, just an update on the number of positive cases that we have to date in the district. So this is all the cases so far, except I apologize. The graph is accurate, but this is accurate as of yesterday morning. We probably had another 10 to 15 cases, I think, come in the last 2 days. So I haven't updated the numbers here on the left. So just overall, you can see, like we anticipated, high schools are experiencing more outbreaks than elementary schools, which is what we anticipated. And just kind of interesting timing-wise, Bonneville was our kind of groundbreaker on the COVID front, and they had quite a few cases early on. That's really slowed down here at Bonneville the last week or two, and Thunder Ridge kind of came after that, and Thunder Ridge is, I can't tell, they're just kind of holding steady a little bit, and then Hillcrest is the one that we've just seen this huge influx of cases. So Hillcrest went almost 4 to 5 weeks without nothing, and then they just got hit really hard this last week, which was especially tough given the tragedy that we experienced at Hillcrest last week with the death of a student. So, the other probably key thing I would point out, I'll just go back, the other place that we got hit hard last week was with transportation. So prior to that, we had not had any confirmed cases in our transportation department, and then starting last week, we experienced multiple confirmed cases, both among the administrative staff, as you mentioned earlier, are also our substitute bus drivers right now, and then followed that with our bus drivers, and that's continued into this week. And so as a result of that, as a result of the fact that we've been shorthanded from the start of the school year with, I think Guy reported we had a quarter of our drivers resign at the start of the year. That just put us really we can't even say bare bones. It pushed us past bare bones into having to have our administrative, and not just administrative staff there, but also our bus mechanics driving. And so really we had absolutely no room for people to be out. And when that happened this last week, that caused us to have to cancel some transportation, which was especially challenging for our families and not a decision that we took lightly. There just really was no other recourse for us last week other than potentially closing school. And we figured shutting down some bus transportation was better than an outright closure for schools. This is essentially the same graph, just looking at it over the last 30 days. I think the thing I want to highlight from this is early on we saw about the ratio we expected, and that is we're seeing more students than staff members were getting reported as positive. Probably the thing that's concerning the most to me right now is just over the last week. So you can see students are in the blue. This is about the ratio that we should be seeing, with more students than staff, by just based on the fact we have 10 times as many students as we have staff members. You can see over the last week, we're seeing more staff members than students, which means operationally we're really starting to get hit hard. And again, with a large district of 1,500 employees, you think it'd be okay, but when it hits certain departments or areas, that makes it really hard to operate. So transportation, we saw that in. Child nutrition has been the next place that we've seen. Again, we're running really, really thin on child nutrition, staffing as it is. While the program from the government to fully subsidize every child's meal is a benefit to our families, that's put a huge strain onto our child nutrition staff. And now as we're starting to lose members out from having to quarantine or becoming ill themselves, we're getting really short-staffed in that area. And then we get into some specialized programs as well. So we saw it at Thunder Ridge in the DRR program at Thunder Ridge. So that's a very specialized unit with specialized training in that unit, and also a unit where there's literally no opportunity to physically distance from the students like we can see in the typical classroom. And so there's an outbreak there, it's typically taking on a lot of people because we have to identify everybody who's in close contact with those students, and there just isn't that opportunity for separation. So let's see, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, we were working through that issue at Thunder Ridge for a couple of hours, and then we're seeing the same thing just in this last day or two with the Discovery program at Discovery Elementary. So when those things happen, there's not a lot of options other than to really close those programs down, because literally we're quarantining all the staff and students in those programs. So definitely seeing some challenges as we get farther into the year. So this chart, again, I'm sharing this with our families every Thursday to give them an update on how things are going in the district. And so you can see the difference between these two charts is this is the number of cases reported on a daily basis, and then this chart is showing the number of people who are actively have COVID during their 14 days that period. So in other words, every person here on this chart, if they're identified on September 27, they're going to have a 2-week period where they're considered infectious with that. So again, you can see our student trend line. It's spiked a little bit here about 3 weeks into the school year, which isn't a big surprise, and it's really stayed pretty flat, and it's been surprising. Well, this is kind of a false decrease because this is today, and the only reason that's tapering off is because we don't have these new cases coming in that'll keep that line going out. And then you can just see how our staff numbers have crept up, and again, we now currently have more staff members diagnosed with COVID than we have with students. And then the top line, this blue area behind, which is really awesome, there we go, is the number of students that are quarantined as a result of being in close contact with these positive cases. So we were sitting at about 150 as our top line mark, and then last week we actually broke the 200 mark with those students. And then you can see that right now we have about 175 students that are currently quarantined as a result of being in close contact, which is a big number. I don't want to downplay that number, but if you think of it as a percentage of our total population of 13,400 students, it's just over 1% of our kids that are quarantined. Yeah, so just this is I think kind of over a weekend, and basically those quarantine days ended, and then as soon as we had new positive cases, then they quarantined again. Because these are the mandatory quarantine lines, and so because our mandatory quarantine is 7 days as opposed to the 14, we are able to get actually some reprieve in days where the kids are not actually quarantined from school. Questions on any of our just data with COVID right now?
Scott, just one real quick one. Do we know, I think I asked this before, but kids that are being quarantined, do we know the number of those kids that are actually testing positive?
Yeah, so
just about the ones that, were
right.
You sat next to this kid, so you might get to stay home.
Right.
Thing.
Yeah.
So that information.
Yeah. So when we were planning it in the summer, and thinking through the logistics of what we'd be facing, we identified 2 attendance codes that we anticipated using. Well, actually 3. One was an online code for people who voluntarily asked to go online instead of being face-to-face in instruction. Then a COVID code for people who were symptomatic or diagnosed with COVID, and then a quarantine code. And then once we started the school year, we were trying to not overwhelm our secretaries, and so we just said, let's just use the COVID code for everybody. And then about 2 to 3 weeks in, we realized we've got to separate those out. So then we started marking those differently. So now we have a quarantine code for some students and a COVID code for the others. But because we didn't have those 2 codes separated to start, there wasn't really an effective way to differentiate between the 2 groups of students. But because both you and Chairman Landers had asked that question, I did spend some time today going through on a student-by-student basis, looking at their attendance records. I think I was only able to get through Thunder Ridge, and I thought Hillcrest. I don't think I made it to Bonneville, and I was not able to identify any students who had previously been quarantined and who were positive. So I don't think that's 100% in our survey, and I'll show the survey results. Some people did respond that their students had been quarantined tested positive after being quarantined. I don't know if I necessarily trust that, just because people can misinterpret questions easily. Or it could be the fact that they, might have had an outside of school quarantine situation and tested positive after that.
Well, I would think you could see a parent whose child developed symptoms while they're home quarantined.
Yeah, and in those situations, I'm not sure if everybody could hear Greg's point, and this is something we've learned along the way. So Greg's point was, if somebody in the household has tested positive and somebody else becomes symptomatic, why go get tested? And actually, I think what public health is communicating to people is, if anyone in your home does become symptomatic, please report that to us. And they're actually including those as, they call them probable, but they're included in the active rates, and those are getting reported to us as confirmed cases. So anytime one individual in the home's been has tested positive and somebody else then becomes symptomatic within that infectious period, then they're treating it as an actual case.
And that's helpful. I think I was trying to make a point. It's a question, I think, more than a point.
Okay.
But if a child is staying home because they were in close contact with someone at school who tested positive, then goes home, and a couple days later develops symptoms.
Yeah.
I can see a parent saying to themselves,
why don't we test? Yeah.
Why am I going to go get a test if I know this child's going to be quarantined anyway?
Yeah.
Which would then suggest I don't really know.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Our message to parents is, if your child does become symptomatic, go see your doctor and have them diagnosed. And that there's one huge benefit to the family to do that, and then it's also a benefit to us if we have that accurate tracking. But the benefit to the family is, if they go and they get tested and they're positive, they essentially get out of quarantine free card for the next 90 days. So once somebody is tested positive, they do not have to quarantine again for 90 days. They do not have to quarantine based on close contact for 90 days. So we've tried to message that to families. We've communicated that to principals. Again, I personally don't believe that our coaches or others are encouraging people to not get tested, to keep playing. We're saying, please go get tested, because that's going to do more for you in the long run than avoiding the test in the first place ever will. Any other questions from any board members on just COVID, reopening?
I guess I have one. Based on the data, do you feel like we have been too conservative? Like, are we keeping too many people out of school because of our policies, or?
Can I wait and answer that question at the end? Yeah. So let me go through, if you're okay, we'll go through the survey data we have, because I do think there's some survey data that's super important to that question, Greg. So the other key thing I wanted to share with the board tonight is the results from the surveys that we sent out to our parents and to our staff members, just to get a sense on how they're feeling on it, how the reopening plan's going. So the first question that we asked is just what grade did you give the school district on safely reopening schools? 62% of parents and 52% of staff gave us A's, and about 28 to 29% gave us B's. So I would have killed for those grades in high school. That's much better than I had in high school. I had a lot more grades on that far left end of the scale. And then closely to that was our grade on communicating effectively. And again, overall people have been happy and gave us good grades on our communication efforts through this situation. So then getting into things that I think really matter. How do you feel about your children's health and safety after the first month? And about 58% of our parents said they felt the same as before school started, and 36% felt better. And I don't have this number here, I could do the math quick, but it's a pretty small percentage that said, I think 6%, is that right? It's up to 94, so 6% said that they feel worse about it. So overall, I think that says a lot about the effectiveness of our plan and how things are going with reopening our schools. These two questions were just for our staff members asking about their risk level, how they're feeling about their risk level performing their jobs, as well as their hardship performing their jobs. And you can see 45%, these numbers are remarkably the same for both questions, but 45% felt that it was higher and more hardship than in past years. I apologize, these numbers aren't here, but this is about 20%, if I remember right, that felt it was much more hardship and much higher risk, and about 20% that felt it was less hardship. So this number actually surprised me as much as anything. It's some pretty honest answers that people are saying that's about the same as before. So these numbers will be critical for our discussion that's coming up in a few minutes about the COVID funding that the state is distributing to schools.
The top one was risk and the bottom was
Yep.
hardship.
Yep, and the numbers were basically identical with both questions. So. Okay, so then getting into the question about the quarantine, and we asked specifically how do both family members and staff feel about the 7-day minimum quarantine for exposure to COVID. Our employees, just under 70% said that they felt 7 days was the right length, and 56% of our families said it was about the right length. And then you can see 15% of our staff felt that it was too short a time, wishing we were probably doing a 14-day full quarantine, and it was about 10% of our families were there. And then 14% of families said that it's too long, and 19% said they didn't believe we should be quarantining at all. And you can see those numbers are much smaller for our staff. And I think I just think it's critically recognized that as we hear, I believe we have to hear concerns from our parents at home, but our staff has to feel safe in doing their jobs. And I think that's the balance we've been trying to find the whole time is how can we accommodate students and families as much as we can, at the same time making sure we're creating an environment for our teachers and the rest of our staff members where they feel safe coming to work and feel like they can continue to perform their responsibilities. And so personally, I'm really pleased with these results, and it feels like we've found that right balance between those two things. And then I did ask what concern level people would have if we stopped quarantining based on close contact. Our employees, 52% felt that there was much more risk to them, or they were much more concerned, I guess is how I should say that, if we were to stop. 36% of our parents felt much more concerned about that. 20% of our staff and 19% of our families felt a little bit more concerned. And then you can see the same level that there were a few that said they would actually have less concern if we did that. So, and then level of support if children are required to quarantine. This question is directed to those families that had not had their children quarantined yet. And you can see that there's still quite a bit of support for that. I don't know if I included it. I did ask families who had their children quarantined how they felt about a second quarantine. And you can, as you can imagine, those numbers definitely went down, but there's still a good level of support for that. And then the one that we started talking with our principals about, probably the one that personally concerns me, is as we ask those people who have had their children have to quarantine from school, what their experience was like with learning. You can see that we had really mixed results. And so only about 20% of people felt like it was a great experience. Just over a quarter felt like it was a good experience. About a third felt like it was okay. And then another quarter felt like it was a poor experience. And so we've got to work together to talk about how do how do we change those outcomes so it's at least an okay, if not a good experience for all of our kids. And I've had some personal conversations with parents who have expressed their frustrations and the lack of what they felt like was adequate instruction during that time that they're trying to do and support the school district in what we've asked them to do. So had a good conversation with our secondary principals about that on Tuesday. Started talking about things we can do to provide some more interventions and support for those kids at home. Okay.
Sharing, Scott, a little bit of a summary about what kind of feedback you were getting, what the frustrations people were having with that.
I think probably the number one thing I would say is a lack of instruction from the teachers. And so when the kids are quarantined, teachers may or may not be providing those learning experiences to kids through Schoology or through Google Classroom. We did put into our plan and we asked teachers at the start of the year that if students do have to quarantine, at least one teacher in that grade level or in that content area should be streaming instruction at home so that there's still an opportunity to actually learn from a teacher, and that's not happening consistently. And then when they're reaching out, they're not feeling like they're getting any adequate answers from the teachers, and they're just saying, well, the work is there, it wouldn't have to do with that. And that's pretty hard for kids to learn math without a qualified and highly effective teacher teaching them how to do it. You know, I'll just say if my kids get quarantined and if either of my girls in high school don't have a teacher teaching them math, they're beyond the point that I can remember how to do their math. And so it would be hard for them to catch up, and those are the things I've heard from, not a lot, from a few parents. And we've got to, I guess what we have to do is make sure that nobody's feeling like they're having a poor experience when they're quarantined.
Is that broken down by school? I don't necessarily want to see it, I'm just curious.
I think I'll have to go back and look. I try to keep this survey pretty anonymous. I'll have to go back and look to see if I ask people to identify their schools.
Just curious.
Scott, would some of that be due to the lack of technology in the homes, or if there are more than one student, maybe there's only one computer in the home and there's 3 or 4 kids trying to get on it at the same time?
Again, it hasn't been a lot, but I have had some parents express that specific concern to me. And again, I encourage them to say we do have, again, it's been a bit of a challenge this fall because our schools still need the Chromebooks in the school for the students that are at school, and we have families that need them at home. And so that's been a bit of a tense situation. We do have a limited number at the district level. I mean very limited number, but some of you said if schools you don't have them, we can get those out to them. We do have hotspots available, and in a bit of really good news, the Idle Business for Education, as well as I just was on the phone with Doug Nelson, our attorney, who's going to make a private donation through a foundation, the Ed Foundation, for connectivity. We can provide connectivity to those families who don't have connectivity in their homes. So we have ways to help that. I don't know that we've been as consistent in communicating that in this situation as we did last spring when we closed school for everybody. So there's definitely some things we need to do better in communicating, letting people know the resources we have available for them. And again, we'll talk about this at the end, but we'll be able to have a significant turning point when it comes to devices for students after Thanksgiving. So, any other questions from the board? So I guess to come back to answer Greg's question is, right now I feel like we've really done a good job of finding that right balance with quarantining. And so again, kind of the key tipping point is if our families and students will just stay home when they're sick, then really that quarantine period is very minimal. It's typically 1 to 2 days by the time we get the test results back, and that students typically have been out of school for somewhere between 3 to 7 days. The thing that has really hurt is our students that are symptomatic and they come back to school. And in some cases, we've had students that have felt sick, they've gone and got tested, felt better, come back to school, and then we find out that then we get the notification they tested positive, and they're still in their infectious period. So now we have to quarantine kids for the full 7 days. And then again, we've had some situations where, and this is no fault of the kids, but they come to school, they feel ill, they go and get a rapid test, and we find out that yep, sure enough, they're symptomatic, and now we have that longer quarantine period. So that's where it's, I think, hurting kids the most is when it's that extended quarantine. But all in all, I really feel like we're doing our best to meet expectations from public health, and we're holding the line on keeping it from being a more widespread outbreak in our schools.
Scott, I know that you guys have put that in the emails that go home to the families about don't come to school if you're symptomatic or if you're pending a test. But it's usually kind of towards the bottom of the email. I know it's bolded, but it's at the bottom. I'm wondering if maybe we could move it up so the parents actually see it, because some people don't read all the way through. They just see, oh, we're in school next week, and then they click out.
Yeah.
Just because that is one of the big reasons that these kids are being quarantined is because the kids are coming back after they're pending a test and they're in school.
Yeah.
And so I know it's really frustrating. I was hoping that could be maybe moved up.
And I think we might even just send out a separate message. It was a little, I guess, discouraging to me to see a question posed on PTO page today about my kid has all these symptoms, but they don't have a fever. Should I send them to school? I can't remember this far, and people still, we haven't obviously communicated that clearly enough that they don't know that, multiple symptoms, your kid really needs to stay home for 24 hours after those symptoms end. So it might just have to be a separate message. And I mean, it's one of the downfalls. I think if anything, we've over-communicated in this situation. I think that's good, but sometimes when you over-communicate, and people, like you said, they just got to get numb. They start missing some of the key pieces of information that they should see. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess one reaction I have is because I think we all wrestle with what's the right balance with protecting staff, protecting students, supporting families. All those issues are very legitimate. We've got to deal with them. And so I ask myself, are being too conservative? Are we quarantining too many kids? Are we? And I don't think so. I mean, in other words, I can't look at those graphs and say, we've just smashed this and there's no cases, right? I mean, the cases are growing, not going down. So how do you make the argument that we're being overprotected or over whatever when those results? I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems.
I think, I don't know if anybody listened to the Public Health Board's meeting last Thursday. I listened as much as I could, and I got pulled away, and then I tried to listen again on YouTube. After the fact, I got pulled away again. But I guess there were a couple key takeaways for me. One is, even though we haven't seen a spike in active rates in the county, they're exceptionally concerned about the hospital rates right now. Just that fact alone would make me really reluctant to do anything different. And again, it's not that our kids are going to the hospitals, and I know we've had one or two, honestly, they felt like there were snarky comments, maybe they weren't intended that way, about how many kids are going to the hospital and why are you quarantining. Well, it's not always about the kid, it's about who the kid goes home to. And so I think it's critical that we're recognizing that there's a larger impact outside of what happened in the school. As the largest school district in the area, we have a pretty fundamental responsibility in what impact our decisions make on the community health at large. And then with that, there was, I think, a lot of appreciation expressed specifically for our school district and District 91 is really holding the line and doing what we can to support public health. And I'm not sure that other districts have been as proactive as we have and really trying to have that understanding role in place. So as I listen, I really feel like we found a really good balance, and right now it feels like it's a sustainable model where other districts around us continue to change and try to find the right answers to their challenges.
Well, Scott, I just have to say, I mean, I look across the nation and there's so many students that are not in school right now. They're at home doing online school, I mean, in so many states, that we are very different. I mean, even within our own state, we still have all the Boise schools that aren't participating in school right now, not face-to-face. And so I do feel extremely fortunate that we've been able to open and to stay open. And even when we have a crisis like with our transportation, having high amount of cases or exposure to positive cases, rather than shutting down the schools, that our school district has really made an effort to keep the kids in school no matter what's going on. And we're going to work together as a community and try and carpool these kids. We're going to try and get them to school. And the importance that is placed on education in our community and from our school district and from our leadership in our school district, from you guys and our administration, I just am so appreciative that we are able to provide an education for these kids. There are so many people that are not, and I appreciate it because my kids are getting educated. As hard as it is, as difficult as things are right now, but at least they are in school 4 days a week. And I appreciate it, and I know it's really hard. There's, we have so many people upset about different things, but I just appreciate our teachers for showing up to school and being willing to be there every day to educate these kids, and appreciate the parents, all these poor parents. I mean, so many people are going through it right now. When their kids are quarantined, they're having to take off work, or they're leaving their kids home alone. They're coming home, their kids haven't done anything the whole day, and the parents are killing themselves at night to try and help their kids get caught up. And so a big thank you to our parents. I mean, it's a big sacrifice, but I just appreciate our school district and the plan that has been put in place and the emphasis on education. I appreciate it. Yeah.
There's probably one more thing that's worth at least mentioning tonight, and I think we'll follow up on it at the next work session. But in that public health meeting, there was this, I think there was a decision to lower the threshold for the county moving to high risk from 50,000 at the area level to 30,000 back at the county level. And we're not there, but we're starting to tick up to that. Our current plan states that that's where we move to an alternating day schedule, but we've had at least some preliminary discussions among the executive leadership team on what's the logic of an alternating day schedule, and how does that benefit the situation. And candidly, I'm not sure that it does. And Jason made a great point. I think it's probably the crucial point in the whole discussion. That is, I think we have a higher degree of compliance with social distancing and wearing masks inside our schools than anywhere else in the community. So my concern is if we go to an alternating day schedule, now there's a good chance that those kids won't be wearing masks on the off day, and it could actually make the situation worse and not better. And so really at this point, I'm not seeing a lot of logic to us going to an alternating day schedule simply based on the fact that the county changed that designation. I actually think they're going to be better off if we keep kids in school. And probably the only thing that would force us into that alternating schedule is if we start to see a significant uptick in either our student or staff population, where we just don't feel like we can. And now we do have to do something to enforce that social distancing. But because to our kids' credit, they've done such a great job, and our administration's credit, they've done such a good job with wearing masks, that really hasn't been the fight that we thought it would be. I really feel like we've got the safest place for kids right here with our schools open. So,
well, and in all honesty, I feel like that's why the kids that are in quarantine aren't experiencing a high amount of positive tests while they're home. Yeah. Because the kid that went home sick or, got sick after school, got out, whatever, he or she had a mask on, and the kids all around them had masks on. So even though we're quarantining them, these kids, they're not coming down with COVID during that quarantine, typically because they did have masks on during school. Yeah. And so I'm super appreciative of that, and I think for the parents, it's tough and it's not fun, but I certainly appreciate that my kids can at least have the opportunity to still be in school.
Yeah, and the change you're talking about, which is like me, honestly, without any other experience, aligns with what we need it to be. Yeah, we can adjust if we have to.
Right.
But I can see the logic of that. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think maybe the key change we can put throughout our plan is changing a lot of wills to mays. and I know that doesn't necessarily give people comfort. Just like we're not at the point we can start making actual decisions based on data and not
hypotheticals that we were basing the plan on back in June and July. So
we do have Mr. Lott has joined. If you're okay, I can take a break. And
Yeah, I did have, can he hear me speaking? Is he participating?
he should, yep, I'm unmuted, so he should be able to hear you speak.
And can I hear him?
Not yet. If you give me a second, then I can get him so you can. So. Okay, Mr. Lott, I think you should be able to speak to the board, and I hope you can hear the board as well.
I had a comment before he starts, that's
Okay,
why
if you want to make your comment, I think he can hear us. It still looks like he's muted, but...
So, Mr. Lott, there were 2 emails sent in before the board for you to appear via Zoom tonight for our meeting. And one of them had checked yes, and another one of your emails had it checked no, that you were going to be discussing complaints about personnel or an individual student. And so I just want to clarify, I guess, which one it was. If it's yes, you were going to have a complaint about personnel or an individual student, then that can't be done in public input and you need to fill out a grievance form. And I'm happy to share where those grievance forms can be found. But if it's not about that, then we're more than happy to hear the public input that you have to share with us in an open meeting.
So Mr. Lott, just 1 second. I can see you're speaking, but I'm not hearing you, so let me just check the settings on my end because I think you're muted. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lott. Yep, we can.
Everybody, I appreciate you guys providing me the opportunity to just provide some comments and some concerns currently over our students in this place. Schools for taking the time to answer your question. I apologize. I was confused about that last question. I do not have any direct complaints pertaining to any teacher or student.
So if I heard him right, there's no complaint about a student or a staff member?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So,
Yeah, Christy.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you again. Again, I just want to share some concerns I have as a parent. I'm concerned for my children. I'm concerned about their education. And it has to do with the masks. I know that you guys, and as leaders of the schools, are trying to do everything you can to, I guess, make this situation as best we can. But again, just some concerns. I guess just to start off is, the mentality of just wear the mask is not necessarily science or order of liberty or constitutional governance. I think we need to debate the effectiveness of the masks, the type of masks, the situations in which they're worn and the duration of time, the benchmarks that need to be met to measure effectiveness, and the process for following these rules. Obviously, we're no longer 24 hours into an emergency, but we're 6 months in. Obviously, still facing challenges. So, just some interesting things that I find is that, why did the CDC and the World Health Organizations and people such as Dr. Fauci indicate that they emphatically dismiss the effectiveness of the mask, and for the 180 degrees, they're going to where they should people who don't wear microbiology of particles hasn't changed. And the premise that, we wear masks, obviously we're not professionals, can possibly risk the counterproductiveness of contamination by wearing the mask. Things that are concerned or questions that I think we should be asking is, if it's suggested that masks are needed to protect others, I think that raises the question, if me not wearing a mask and a mask transmits the virus to others who are wearing a mask, then it's not that an admission that masks do not work and to stop the respiratory virus. Obviously, garbage in, garbage out. To me, it makes no sense to just suggest that it doesn't penetrate the transmitter's mask from the inside out, especially when the air pressure of a cough or a sneeze can penetrate the mask and the receiver through suspended molecules that are stagnant without pressure pushing those molecules, outside in to the receiver. If anything, the opposite should be true. It should be more effective for protection of yourself. I think another question to ask is, how can mask wearing work when everyone just stores them in their pockets to collect bacteria? Is that transmitting other kinds of viruses and such? Particularly with kids. Kids, they tend to get messy, and is that a concern there? What other thoughts did I have? Let's try and make this brief. What are the potential side effects of wearing masks, especially for children in school? Obviously, I think there's quite a few children that are dealing with maskne, I think is what they call it. I should have invested in some proactive prior to this going on. I guess the concern is to suggest that individuals be forced to do something so personal as to cover their own faces indefinitely under the guise of protecting others is a huge traumatic change for these kids. I'm concerned about them. I'm concerned about their welfare. I'm concerned about the long-term impact and ramifications for our kids. I'm concerned about bullying. As a parent, once this goes away, our kids going to start shaming and bullying each other if they don't necessarily wear masks. I'm not going to identify any individuals, but I just want to talk about a few circumstances my children have talked about. One of my kids indicated that in a class she was studying her assignment. She indicated that the steam from wearing the mask was fogging up her glasses. She pulled the mask down below her nose and was immediately rebuked by the teacher to wear the mask correctly. I found this to be a problem. I had another instance in which one of my kids indicated that they have a physical education class first hour. They were screened for temperature immediately after the class and indicated that they had a high temperature. The child was then sent to the office and missed their second hour. Again, I think common sense would suggest that, of course, after a child has had a physical education class, that they're going to be a little hot. So for her to be, sent to the office to miss her second hour, that was very frustrating. And most recently, my child was notified at school that due to them being in contact with somebody at school who reportedly tested positive, my child is now suspended for a week and cannot return to school until this Friday. Again, I'm very frustrated and upset from the perspective of this is impacting my children's education. And as a parent, I'm emotional about the situation. I know that people are trying to work on solutions and stuff like that. But bottom line, my concern is for my kids. I just wanted to come before you guys tonight and just express my concerns. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. And wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lott, for sharing those concerns. Those are not new concerns. We've gotten those a lot from many parents. At least I know I, as a board member, have received a lot of those same concerns. Some of which even my own self have had at certain times, or others having students still in the system as well. And we're in a tough spot having to keep kids in school, comply with public health guidelines, and talking with our attorney and dealing with legal matters, trying to make our teachers feel safe and our students and the parents who are concerned feel safe. It's a tough spot to be in, and I appreciate you sharing your concerns. It's definitely something that is not new to us, and I appreciate you taking the time and coming to talk to us. And it's just tough. Does our superintendent have anything to add to that, to say? Is there any other board members that have anything to add?
Well, I don't have anything to add. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Lott, and I think one of the comments you made was about common sense. And we have to exercise common sense in the classroom and all that we're doing in school, and I would just echo that. I just think that's really important.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us during public input. I appreciate that. If you have further concerns or anything, feel free to send us emails or to contact the superintendent through an email as well. We appreciate you. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Guy Wainsgard to...
So, if okay, Chairman Liners, I really covered, I think, what we needed to cover on transportation and child nutrition in the report. I just wanted to emphasize that, let the board know that those are two areas that we're really experiencing some challenges, and we're working on different innovative solutions to those challenges, but nonetheless, it's we're in a challenging space with both of those. So, is there anything else you really wanted to add to that, Guy, at all? Or?
Okay, well, that was quick. We are down to three more things here. Okay, so we'll go to the early literacy results. Jason Lawrence. Yeah, the report on early literacy. You gave me a look. Is that what you're here to talk about?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's just when I filled out when I put my stuff together, I think I've called it early literacy, IRI, iStation. So it's a number of different things. But it's always this year. I don't know if it's different, but it's exciting to see. I think what we've tried to decide was where did we have, what issues. What should I do? I want to go back. I know, I told you I drew really fast. No way. I have to go back, stop. Oh, I'm going, I got it.
It's there.
Okay, well, anyway, so one of the things that we have been asking questions about was when we closed schools in March and students were learning at home, what impact is that going to have on our students? And especially as we were looking at early literacy and the focus that we've had as a school district on early literacy and really trying to get our K through 3 students at that point where by the time they're leaving 3rd grade, they're proficient at reading, especially as they're moving into the upper grade levels and then into the secondary schools, middle school and high school. That they're focused so much on reading at that young, early level, and they're learning to read instead of reading to learn as they get older. And so that's been a focus that we've had. And actually, I just really liked this quote. We were at a literacy conference last year, and this, I don't know if you can read it real well, but it says students will read if we give them the books, the time, and the enthusiastic encouragement to do so. If we make them wait for the 1 unit a year in which they are allowed to choose their own books and become readers, they may never read it all. And the last sentence really what I like: to keep our students reading, we have to let them. And I think if you go into any of our, especially any of our classrooms, in the older grades, it's the ELA, the English classes, but in our K through 3 classes, that's what the students are really, really focused on is reading. And really getting those students to read. And this first slide is just really kind of a quick explanation of what our idle reading indicator is. We use iStation, and then how it reports back to us. And actually stole this slide from Scott. He gets the copyright on it, but and it flips a little bit from what we would talk about with like our assignment-based grading, for example. A lot of times you're saying a 3 is going to be the highest. Well, with iStation, a 1 is proficient. 2 is basically a tier 2 where they're below grade level and need a little more time, support to get there. And then tier 3 is significantly below level, and students will then need quite a plan. So what happens is our K through 3 students take this iStation test on the computer. If they score a 2 or a 3, we write literacy plans for those students. And from the state, a student scores a 2 or in tier 2, they have to have 30 hours of extra intervention. And then a student that scores a 3, they have to have 60 hours of intervention. And so that was just a quick explanation. Here's where our grade levels scored this year, and this is just the flat. Here's the green are the 1s, and then the yellow are our 2s, and the red are our 3s in each grade level. And the next slides will have kind of more of a comparison. This is just what our flat numbers were. And of course, when we pulled the report and looked at this, my first question was, okay, well, how does that compare? Especially when we're looking at, I guess, a couple of things with kindergarten. How does that compare to our last 4 years? This is the 4th year of using our iStation test, so we do have some pretty good data on how students are coming in from kindergarten. And if you remember from the conversations that Dr. Wilson's had in his State of the District report and everything, that our kindergartners have over the last few years come in lower, which I was curious to see if the pandemic had any impact, positive or negative. And if you look at this first slide, so the light colored ones are last year's numbers, the dark are current. So from this year, 2020, the students take the test in September, and then each month the teachers, as they move through instruction, they can benchmark with that assessment as well. And then the state requires us to take it in September and in May, but then our teachers will then typically do it once a month to help students just be able to get better with the assessment, but then they also use that to help students because it gives them specific skill, whether it's vocabulary, spelling, a number of different things that then the teachers can focus on that specific skill. But if you look at like this one, for example, kindergarten, and again, it's different students, right? We're looking at different students. Our 2019 kindergartners are different than our 2020, so I always think that's important. But it looks, in this one, it shows that we're lower this year by about 2% with our proficient students. Lower in our tier 3 and higher in our lower in our tier 2 and then higher in our tier 3. This shows our last 4 years comparison, and I would say it's about what we've seen over the last 4 years is our kindergartners are coming in lower each year, and our teachers. What I'm always amazed by is our teachers, even though they're coming in lower, our teachers still get them to that same spot. And so our students are actually growing more, but it doesn't necessarily show it when we get back to 90% of our students that are being proficient. Actually, more students are becoming proficient, just they're getting that back to that level. So that's been very interesting. Here's our first grade. In first grade, I would say with this, and again, I'll have another couple of slides that I think does a really good job of explaining the cohorts, right? A first grader to second grade and how they've done. because this one, it looks like a huge jump, right? You look at Tier 1 and you go, holy cow, it's a big jump. Well, it's different students. I do think that the March to May did have a little bit of an impact. And then Tier 2 is, we actually have more students there, which again, we have such a big number that moved from Tier 1 to Tier 2, so that doesn't surprise me a ton. And then our Tier 3 is much higher as well. And that's first grade. And here's our first grade comparison over the last 4 years. Last year's 2019 group seemed to be a pretty high group. 2017 was definitely high. And then we did drop there as well. This is our second grade. And what's very interesting, as you'll notice in these second and third grade, you start to see our Tier 1s much higher, which I think shows the hard work that our teachers are doing in those grade levels. By the time they get to third grade, we definitely have more students coming in at Tier 1 and then staying in Tier 1.
So are those tests, sorry, Jason, at the beginning of the year?
Yes, these are all September. These are all just fall. Because we didn't have data last year from the spring, because what happened last year in the spring, we weren't able to test students. The state opened it up for students to test at home, but it took us about 3 days to realize that it was just too difficult for the students to do without the support and help of the teachers and the parents to actually get them on, get the system running. If there was any type of glitch, in fact, I heard stories of a student had sat there for 2 hours to try and get the test running and they couldn't get it running. I'm like, why? It's a first grader having to sit there for 2 hours. That's crazy. So we actually just said, you know what? The state said if you can do it, try and do it. And we just said, well, we've had so much frustration over a week of trying to do it that we just said we're just not going to do it. So we don't have the numbers to show how our students had done last year, which our teachers were pretty disappointed in because they were excited with the new things that they had learned and were working on, that they really wanted to see that data, but we didn't get that. And then here's the Tier 1 students for the last 4 years. And I'd say, if you look at 2017, 2018, and 2020 are very similar. 2019 was quite a bit higher, and again, they're different students. So, and then here's our third grade, and again, you see our third grade Tier 1 it's lower, but I wouldn't say it's huge. And then our Tier 2 is very similar, and Tier 3 is pretty similar as well. And again, I look at the high percentage of students in third grade coming in like already somewhat prepared, and I think that's what our teachers are continuing to do in those kindergarten, first, second grade, getting them ready for third grade. Then our third grade teachers will get them to that proficient level. And then Tier 1s in third grade, a little bit lower, but still not a huge number. Now, here's the cohort ones, and when I looked at this was actually interesting to me because now it's showing your first grade or your kindergarten to first grade, so it's following those students. And again, we have different students. We have some move in, some move out, so that changes some of it as well. But if you look at our Tier 1 students, it's not a huge percentage change. Tier 2, not a huge. We do have less. And then Tier 3, when you have less than Tier 1 and Tier 2, of course, your Tier 3 is going to be a little bit higher. First to second grade. This one was really interesting to me because in our Tier 1, we actually had more students proficient in the fall this year than we did last year, which is that's the random. And then you'll see that Tier 2 has less, and then Tier 3 is getting back to more. So, and then second to third grade again, not as significant. I mean, it does have 8 percentage points different, but when I looked at the others, I was a little more nervous going, holy cow, we did lose a lot, but this one, comparing the student to student following that cohort, wasn't as significant as the other was. So, are there any questions going through that? As I was putting this together, I'm like, okay, I'm sure you're tired of seeing just graphs and different colors and whatever else, and so I was hoping to not make it real confusing, but.
So Jason, just summarize it overall. In September of 2020, we're doing worse.
Yeah, our numbers are, yes, our numbers are lower. And There's been some research done. There have been a number of articles that I read on Education Week, or I can't remember what the other one I was reading, where they talked about pandemic and the pandemic learning, and then people coming back in and saying, oh, we've really got to pound this, we're so far behind, and they said you can't get wrapped up into that because students are going to come in, they talk about the summer slide, and those 3 months, even though it wasn't the same learning, it was still more than what a student would get during the summertime. And so, because I think a lot of times people think, well, we're going to have a 3-month slide plus another 3-month slide, or so our students are going to be way down here. And I don't, looking at our numbers, I don't think we're there. Yes, our students did come in lower, but typically what will happen with our teachers anyway, at the beginning of the year, they do a lot of review, and they're really focused on those specific essential skills that not only this assessment is going to show, but then like with Lexia, it's another program that we use to help to intervene with students based on where they are. And actually a lot of the conversation that we've had is what we really think will happen is teachers are really going to focus on those essential standards. Here's what those kids have to know and may have missed, and so let's make sure and check on that right now and then continue to focus on those things. And then that's what we've heard from the principals as well.
Yeah, I just wondered how the decline related to the COVID problems last spring and all of that. So I know
and if you
hard
notice
to tell, but certainly.
And you always see a bit of a summer sliding, and so it's hard to tell. I mean, it's a little bit more than I typically see, but I wouldn't say that this is that atypical of what we usually see between spring and fall. So,
but I think we expected. We expected some of this.
And actually when I looked at the numbers, and especially looking at these ones, the graphs were compared to cohorts, the groups of students, I actually was, I wasn't as alarmed, and not that I was alarmed before, but it felt better than when I was putting the other numbers together. And again, it's different groups of students. Sometimes you have high students coming through in a grade level and not as high the next year, and so that definitely goes into the data if you're just comparing year to year and not cohort.
So Jason, sorry. Do you know what our percentages look like in 2018? So if you look at the 4-year, and this is just showing that. So all this is showing is the tier 1, which is the proficient students. And we have the 4, and like I said, as you move up to 3rd grade, the numbers start to, I think, stabilize better. But again, the hard thing with this is it's not necessarily showing the cohort, it's just showing a group of students. But we can look at it and say, here's where our students typically do come in. And like I said, 3rd grade, I would say, is not too different. 2nd grade, compared to last year's students, is significantly lower, but before the 2 years before that, 2017, 2018, not too significantly different. And then 1st grade was lower. Do you think COVID really played a big deal with that?
Well, I think it, somewhat. I think especially if you look at like a 1st grader, which would have been your kindergartners last year, just the focus that those kindergarten teachers have on reading. When they're there for 2.5 hours a day, they're reading. I mean, that's what they're doing. They have, their 10-minute recess, but they are there reading, and I think that would have made an impact. But what I'm excited to see, honestly, is what our teachers do with the students this school year. And I think we'll see a big difference in how those students come in next year and then continue. And even at the end of the year, I'm excited to see and compare the scores at the end of the year to what we have the last 2 years. We'll be able to compare 2018, the end of 2017 year, then the 2018 year. Last year we won't have any data, but we'll have those 2 years to be able to compare it with. And I'm excited because I know our teachers were really excited last year to be able to see how students had done throughout the year, just with the instructional strategies that they were using. They were very disappointed when they didn't have that data.
I think it would be super interesting to be able to get data from other districts, seeing what they're doing. It's different than what we're doing, especially not being in school as much as our kids are in school. That would be interesting data. I feel like it's super big positive for kids to be in school face to face with the teacher.
Yeah, I agree. Any other questions?
Is there any other questions?
Any questions? I think just a statement, maybe overall, I think we're going to see a lot. I mean, this is just, one example, but I think overall we're going to see a lot of these scores come down across the board. And so, it keeps going back to my mind. I'm sorry we already talked about this before, but, I'm really worried about the kids that are not in school. I'm worried about the kids that are being quarantined, that might be healthy, that might not be in school, that are, that are struggling, that are failing. And so, I think it's important that we monitor the data and we see how this thing progresses, but, I'm almost to the point where I disagree with keeping a lot of these kids home that are healthy, because I really think it's affecting their academics. I think sometimes we have these solutions, but I think the solution is almost going to become bigger than the problem. So, just a general statement moving forward. I don't know. I think we'll have to really watch this, because if it really starts affecting academics, it obviously affects everything, their mental state and everything, but I think we're going to have some hard decisions to make where we have to draw the line eventually, where if it's affecting their academics too much across the board, we're going to have to do something, get them in school, or like we said before, come up with better options for when they're at home, that they can keep up on their work.
And that's
just an overall statement.
Well, and I'd say that's where a lot of our focus has been in the last couple of weeks of not only looking at this data, but just even before that, just how do we we've had the conversation. And I'm very simple, so I'm like, gosh, how do we simplify this? If I'm a teacher, I'm going to throw a Chromebook up and just stream my class, record it, and I know it's not that simple. Of course, there's some questions from the other things, but I know I was in a classroom with an elementary teacher that she was home, the sub was in the building, and had the students there, and we were trying to problem solve, just make sure we could get the Chromebook up and working. And so she did her lesson, and then I said, well, can you stay on for a minute, just so I can troubleshoot some of these things? And so I put the computer facing the class, not on purpose, just I was doing something else, and the students were working, and it was actually really cool, because she had noticed that some students were raising their hands, so she called in the student, had them come up to the computer, they showed her the worksheet they were working on, and asked the question, and she helped them, and I was like, that seems simple, but I think we can do things like that. So, and then the sub-student was there to be able to have other questions and be able to help classroom manage, and so we're learning and trying to get better.
Oh yeah, and it's tough, and it's not. My hat goes off to the teachers and stuff too, because they're trying to be in two places at once.
Yeah.
So much, so it's not a. It's tough. That's all I got. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason. Dr. Wilston, talking about initial policies for consideration.
Yep. So I'll just take both of these if that's okay. So the board is receiving two policies tonight, and these are under the administrative reports of information, and they're being submitted to the board for initial consideration. The first is 1120, taking office, which has been revised per ISBA recommendations, and you're welcome to contact me or Mary with questions about that. And then the second one are immunization requirements. That's been revised in accordance with your immunization schedules, as well as to align with the administrative rule on immunization. So I think there's two key parts to that one. Jason spent most of the time on it, so he could ask or speak more fluently to it, but one of them is there's an additional required vaccination for seniors, which is the meningitis vaccination, and then on the other side, there's less restrictive rules on people asking for exemptions to vaccinations, on what they have to do for that. So those are the two key changes, aren't they?
Yeah. So the one is there's a form that the state puts out, and so the statutes at one thing and the board rules at something different, and now they actually match. It's awesome when they work together like that. And it basically just says they don't have to use that form.
They can submit a written request to be exempt for the vaccinations.
So it's more lenient for people who want to exempt their kids from
it. Makes it, less hoops to jump through for them to exempt their students, just because they can submit it in writing rather than using a state form for it.
Scott, I know there's been some confusion with that form throughout our schools. Has that been updated throughout the district? That state form, the parents' options?
Jason, you know?
Yeah, it will be. Well, there was a.
I know I've had some questions about that.
Yeah, there was a letter that was sent out by one of the high schools that wasn't really necessarily supposed to be sent out. It was really for the information for the school and the secretaries, and then on that it didn't specifically have the exemption board rule or rule in there. It didn't say anything about exemptions. It just said talked about the immunizations. And so what happens, we have a specific form letter that goes out to students that outlines what immunizations they're missing. And then on there, I added a section, and it's, I think it's, I can't remember, it's F3 in your packet. F3 or E3, I can't remember which one. But it's in the blue that we added the exemption note that it doesn't have to be on the form. It can also be student's name, date of birth, parent signature, parent guardian signature. So that's what should go home to a parent, is a form letter saying your student's not in compliance with the immunization, and then it actually has on there what immunization they need to get taken care of. And but I think a big concern for a lot of the parents with immunization is that it didn't add in it can be just on a form. At least that's what I've heard.
All right, is there any questions from board members with regards to the policies that are up for initial consideration? Okay, hearing none. Dr. Wilsonham, just going to quickly talk about the ISBA.
Yep, so just a couple of things with the ISBA. One, because it is a virtual conference, they have reached out and asked that we submit our resolution to them in a recorded format to help facilitate, I guess, their end with presenting those. So I appreciate Mr. Calder volunteering his good looks and his radio voice to do that for us. So we'll just work with him to get that done and submitted this week. Probably the second thing is just for our planning purposes, we have reserved the PLC building. It's where we can all socially distance and be relatively comfortable. If anybody wants to attend there, if you're more comfortable attending at home, that's fine too. But just for planning purposes, it might be helpful to know who wants to be together at the PLC building versus who wants to be home in your jammies. So I know, Greg, I think you said you're not able to attend this year. Anybody else?
Does that mean we can't wear our jammies there?
You can have your jammies there as well, Paul. You're more than welcome. Well, it depends on what your jammies look like.
So you need the board members to let you know if they plan on.
Just let Mary know.
Okay.
That would just help mostly for planning refreshments and treats and such. So.
And that leads into also for the business session, where we all need to vote on the resolutions that are being put before the school boards. I guess we need to let ISBA know here in a couple of days who's planning on, how are we going to attend? Are you guys planning on virtual attendance, and we'll just, like, I could get everybody's votes and I can vote for everybody the way that we want? Or are we planning on all being at the PLC building? I just wanted thoughts super quickly on, for that business session. It is Monday, November 9th. Well, no, it's not, sorry. That's the region meeting. Hold on, Mary. Where is that business session?
On the back. Turn to the back. That's the business section.
Yeah. I know, I'm trying to see on the schedule what they got.
It's on Thursday at 10 o'clock, right?
Thursday at 10? Okay.
It's Thursday at 10.
Okay. Yeah, so Thursday, November 12th at 10, where do you guys plan on meeting? Do you want to be at home and in via Zoom and text me your votes. Do you want to come to the PLC building that day?
Can we make that decision, give you that information at the next work session?
Yeah, it's close, we just need to know by October, what did it say, 23rd or something like that?
23rd is the video.
It said something on this paper about when we have to let ISBA know. It was in an email that we brought earlier today, I believe. Scott, do you remember when that date was? Right off the get-go? It was on the email that came through today.
I have it here. So it says, when you and the board decide, please direct someone in your district to complete the survey by October 23rd.
Yeah, so we need to let them know by October 23rd. So Paul, if you could let Mary know by October 22nd, would that be okay? And I guess just for all board members, if you guys could just respond and let Mary know for that business session, how you plan on attending.
So I can, which meeting is it where you're going to ask for nominations for officers?
That one is the region meeting on Monday, November 9th, from 1 to 5. And I don't think any of our board members signed up for those early classes on Monday, the workshops. I don't think anyone. Nobody signed up for those. So basically, Scott needs to know who's going to be at the PLC building.
And really just Mary.
And let Mary know so she can let Scott know and Mary know food-wise what they need to do. So they need to know when we plan on being there, how long maybe we plan on being there. And
I can't hear you very well.
I was looking through the workshops that are available, and I'm not sure how they're going to run those because they sent out the magazine that had all of the topics in there. Are they going to let us pick those topics on any workshop because it's virtual? Or are they running them like this one's only available 1 and 3? Or
I believe they are recording the convention, and anyone who is part of the group can go in and review all the workshops within a certain time period.
because that's, I guess, what I would be interested in if there's 2 or 3 workshops that I was interested in, if I could just get into them at any time, or if I have to be attending at 10:15 to 11:15 or something. I guess that's something we probably need to find out, but we'll get back to Mary. So if the board members could please take a minute to look at that and text Mary specifically with how you're planning on attending and specifically about the business session. Is there any questions about that? Okay. Scott, did you have anything more to add about the ISBA?
No, I think that's all. Other than their site's blocked as potential terrorist site, so that's awesome. That's funny.
Okay. All right, we have proposed policies for final adoption. Guy, would you like to come up and present those policies to the board?
We've talked about these for, it seems like a long time now, but just bringing a couple of the child nutrition policies in line with current practice, 8410 and 8455. I have not had any comments or questions or concerns regarding these policies, so we recommend that they be forwarded.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Calder to go ahead and accept those, seconded by Mr. Dance. Is there any discussion or questions for Guy? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And
So I'll fill in for Mr. Pim. He was helping out with some event tonight. So I don't know if you remember, but on the northeast corner of Bonneville's property, we have a drainage ditch that runs across that, and then we have a property on the north side of that property owners in on the other side of that. And we've allowed them to lease that for basically $0 to maintain that is basically the back part of the property up to our drainage ditch. We have another landowner that would like to do that. We would recommend that we do that as a year-to-year lease.
Different parcel, the same kind of circumstance.
Right, same circumstance. They're just, that's a subdivision on the north side, so this is just another lot that they would like to go in and maintain that property.
Is there any questions about that? I guess we could just call for a motion and see if there's any discussion. So I would call for a motion.
I move that we approve the lease as described.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Dam, seconded by Mr. Collier. Is there any discussion on the leasing of the property for the patron to maintain that land? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And the textbook approval, Jason, I know you sent out quite a list. So.
That's why there's so many people here. It's the curriculum conversations.
Yeah.
So there were two different ones that I sent out. One was the supplemental curricular, where it went on to the consent agenda, and that just has a list that our learning team reviews and discusses, and those aren't textbooks, those are more novels, those are supplemental type things. But what this is there are 6 different textbooks, and the textbooks are there's 4 of them that are for English classes that are the dual credit, English 175. It's interesting because if a teacher is approved to teach at a certain college, that specific textbook goes for that class. It's different than the novels. The novels the teacher can choose, but then the textbook is what the university has. And so when they update to the new edition, then we have to do that same thing. There's been times where teachers are like, well, we can kind of use this and see if it works, but then it gets to the point where then we have to. So that's the Norton Introduction to Literature, and this is a little bit of the conversation we were having last year when we were talking about novels. Instead of a teacher specifically teaching certain novels, they're using a literature book that has little short stories, the poems, and just different things, almost like you'd see in a typical high school classroom for a lot of what our secondary schools use. In the regular English class, those kind of short stories, short poems, those types of things. And that's what the Norton Introduction to Literature is. The informed argument talks about, that was for the college writing, talks about argumentative writing and just different things like that. Back to the Lake is the same thing. It's about reading and writing instruction, and that's for CEI. Again, if we have teachers that are teaching dual credit English class, depending on the university or the college, they're going to use different textbooks specifically for that. And then there's Perrin's Literature, Structure, Sound, and Sense, and it's about writing, different literature structure that you can see with that. And then there's also, I think, a really controversial one, elementary statistics. That is very. And then we have the Heritage of World Civilizations. It's for a dual credit world history class that is taught here at Bonneville. In fact, the teacher, it was funny when he said, and he's like, well, they're telling me I have to use another textbook. So I found this. He was looking. He's like, I found this one. I think it'll be cheaper. It'll be just fine for us to use. Well, we went to get it, and it's out of print. We can't find it anywhere. So he found this. So he's like, well, this will work. I just don't want it to cost a lot. So it was really pretty funny. The teacher that did that is taught in our school history. In fact, I had him as a history teacher when I was in school. But so that's the other textbook is that World Civilizations. Any questions about any of those?
So there is some leniency with the teachers being able to choose a new textbook? Or not really?
Typically what they're doing is they're updating whatever the edition was that they had before. And so it's they're trying to get whatever the edition was. And I think it also depends on the university. Like the world history one was at CEI, and I would say that one's from CEI is probably a little bit more. It has to be this specific textbook. They're not as specific. At least they weren't with that one. We have found times where they're saying, no, it has to be this specific textbook. As opposed to like the novels, the teacher has more leniency on what they're choosing for novels than they do even the professor. request for the university textbook.
So maybe board members would either call for a motion and do a discussion, or however you guys want to work it. We do need a motion though. Mr. Calder has moved that we approve the textbooks. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Dance. All right, is there any discussion from the board? Any questions for Mr. Lords? Okay, hearing none. I kind of feel like we don't have a lot of, not as much leniency in this area as we did with the other materials, and so.
Jason, I'm going to put it on you, these good textbooks.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. The other thing when we're having that conversation with the teacher, that how the different novels and we're choosing those things. The textbook is
the textbook.
Yeah, it's the textbook. It's a different. Yeah.
So we have a motion on the table in a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right. Dr. Wilsingham talking about the coronavirus relief fund.
So we discussed this with the board, and we do not have any really significant changes when we talk about the work session, but we do feel like it's a significant allocation of funds from the state that we need for the board to formally approve what we're discussing. So first of all, just some things we've learned over the past few weeks that are critical to the decisions we made on what we're doing with the funding is, first of all, whether we like it or not, we either spend the money by December 30th or we lose it. So it's not an opportunity for us to really do much with our fund balance. It's really allocated with the intent that we spend that money by that date. Did I get a picture? Actually, I looked up that saying because I didn't understand what the saying really referred to. So I did learn something today on what it means to look a gift horse in the mouth. So
Nice thing.
it is a nice thing, so flattering. The second key thing is that our expenditures have to be directly related to costs incurred from COVID-19. So again, we can't, for example, just go back and restore teachers' salaries because that's not a cost that's directly incurred from COVID. And then the last one, which is an interesting one, is we have to use this for unbudgeted expenses. And so basically, if we included something in our budget that the board approved last spring, then that's not an allowable expense. These have to be somewhat unanticipated or at least unbudgeted expenses.
So Scott, we can't use it to reimburse?
Well, reimburse what?
Just for like what we have already pulled out of fund balance for other items that we've had to buy, the thermometers.
Yeah, those things are. So those things that were directly related to COVID that weren't necessarily in our budget, I don't think we necessarily have thermometers in our budget. So those would be allowable expenses, and those are some of the examples we'll talk about here. So basically we have three broad categories on how we will spend the money: employee compensation, support for blended learning, and additional costs like the thermometers you mentioned, Amy, due to COVID. So as I get into the employee compensation, I think there's a couple of important concepts for the board to understand on why we're doing what we're doing. So first of all, we have two distinct categories of employees. Generally, when we talk about them in the school district, we talk about certified versus classified, which means people that have a certification or a license versus those that do not. But there are some other interesting things that go into those categories. So in terms of employment, certified are on a contract basis, where classified are at will. The pay for certified is on a salary basis, where classified is hourly. If you look at the Fair Labor Standards Act, then certified are exempt, which means that they do not get paid any overtime for the extra hours that they put in. Classified gets paid overtime because they're not exempt from that. The one kind of key exception that doesn't cleanly fit in the certified versus classified is we have just a very few, like probably three, classified administrators that are also exempt. So, for example, Guy is not certified; he's not a certified educator, but he is exempt because he's in an administrative role and his salary is high enough that we can get exempted from that. So, again, we don't have very many, but there are a couple that are in that category. So just examples of positions: certified, of course, teachers, pupil service staff, which are counselors, psychs, speech language therapists, administrators, and that's where some of our classified administrators are not certified, but they are exempt. And then, and it's about, we have right around 700, just over maybe 750 positions that are certified, and probably about 800 to 850 classified positions, just for kind of a breakdown. It's fairly close to 50-50 split between those. So that's one key thing to recognize as we talk about the plan. The other one is we spend a lot of time talking about hazard pay. There are some cautions against how you use this funding for hazard pay. Basically, the overall caution in the guidance from the federal government is don't do blanket hazard pay for everybody. And we talked about this in the work session, and I guess I somewhat disagree with that. We had this discussion with our auditors that really everybody's at risk once we went to face-to-face instruction and opened up our doors again. What we've talked about the last week or so is that there is certainly a different level of risk depending on what position that you're in. And so we've created 3 categories of risk. The one that applies to almost everybody in the district is high risk. And so basically anybody, so let me just talk about how we're classifying those. So we're using really two aspects to that. First one is your ability to physically distance in the course of your job, and then the second one is how much contact you have with other people in the daily course of your job. And so at that high risk level, people who have the opportunity for limited physical distancing, so for example, classroom teachers, for the most part they can physically distance, but there's still certainly times that they're interacting more closely than that as well, and they have a high level of contact, basically continuous contact with a lot of kids during the day. And so that's really kind of like almost everybody in the district, when you look at our employees, falls into that high risk category. There are a few positions that are higher risk than that, and the 2 that we've identified are aides that are on buses, because they're not like the drivers at the front of the bus where there's some separation between them and the kids. They're literally right in the middle of the kids with no opportunity to social distance from those kids. And the other groups that applies to are the people that work in our special education. Not every classroom with the general special education, but those special units like we talked about tonight, where they're just really very close with kids, very close contact. A lot of times those kids cannot wear masks, and that's why we're seeing some outbreaks in those units, is because of that very limited social distancing. So really just 2 very small groups that we're classifying in that highest risk. And then kind of same thing in the moderate risk, a pretty limited group in that moderate risk, but there are people, and I just say I think I include myself in this moderate risk, where while I do interact with people on a daily basis, I'm not interacting with the same number of people that our teachers interact with. Typically in my office we can physically distance, and so I really don't feel like I classify myself as at high risk or highest risk. And so people at that district level that are typically working in their offices by themselves, again, they have some interaction with people, but not that high interaction that teachers have, then we're classifying those as moderate. So I feel like that helps meet the expectations that we're not just doing blanket hazard pay for everybody, but we're really carefully thinking about what is the risk to people and differentiating pay based on that. So for the expenditures, what we're recommending is 54% of it go to certified extra duty pay. So again, those people that are certified and exempt, they never get overtime. They just work, and there's no compensation for that. And so we're proposing, because the expenses have to be incurred by December 30th, then we're going to basically pay them an hour a day for the start of the teacher's contract days up until December 30th, which is really December 18th because of Christmas break. So basically an hour a day that they're getting compensated to do things like prepare for blended instruction, make sure that they're contacting families. And so again, while there may have been, and still could be some maybe reticence for teachers to go to that extra effort to contact families, now they'll be signing a work agreement that says they will do that. And I feel like it's recognizing both what they are doing for those that are and for those that aren't, and setting that expectation that if they want the extra compensation, then these are the things we need them to do. And then 19% would go to hazard pay, and you can see we're at the highest level. We're recommending $1 an hour increase to their hours that they worked again from basically the start of school until Christmas break. 75 cents an hour for people in the high-risk category, and 50 cents an hour for people in the moderate-risk category. And then to Chad's point that we were talking about earlier, we are going to use 16% of the funding for Chromebooks, and what that will do is that will get us to 1-to-1 ratio for both students and teachers. So basically we'll have a Chromebook for every kid in the district, plus every teacher. That means we're going to have ordered roughly 5,000 more Chromebooks from last spring until now, and we're doing that through literacy intervention funds, through other funding from the state, specifically for this, using this last round to get about 2,500 more to get us finally to that 1-to-1 ratio. And then that leaves us 12% that we can use to charge to things like thermometers, digital resources that we have had to add because of the number of people that went online. A few of the online positions we had to add, probably some substitute costs because we are seeing higher substitute costs because of the number of people that are quarantined, classified overtime. So again, classified positions, if there are extra responsibilities that are causing them to work beyond their normal hours, they're already getting compensated for that. This allows us to also compensate those people that are exempt. So just on a quick dollar amount, you can see how that breaks down in dollars for us. So, any questions from the board on that plan? So again, on the certified extra pay, there will be a work agreement that every individual who receives that will need to sign that work agreement and agree to perform those additional responsibilities. The hazard pay will just be a blanket. Everybody's going to get that based on the fact they're showing up to work.
I think that's awesome that we can provide some extra pay.
Me too. And it's interesting because it makes up what teachers would have normally received as a pay raise plus a little bit more, which I'm really grateful for. And it's not just, it is actually recognizing the fact that they are putting it above and beyond what they've typically done. And I know our teachers are feeling pretty burned out and stressed out right now, and I honestly don't think pay is the answer to that, but I think it goes a long ways to recognize the fact that they understand that we recognize it and that we finally have a way to compensate them for it. So any questions at all from the board on that? Again, on that certified extra duty, that would apply to all certified staff as well as any classified administrative staff that are exempt.
I don't have any questions.
I think you said this, and I just missed it, but the certified, is that an hourly, like how much is, how do you figure out how to?
It would be based on their daily rate or their hourly rate. Yep. Yep.
So if we can get a motion to...
Do you want any explanation on that? Or approach to it? Or, okay.
You just take your salary and divide it by 2,000 hours.
Yep. So it's basically based on the length of their contracts. The teachers are on a 190-day contract, and that gives us a daily rate, and we're assuming 8 hours a day when we figure their hourly rate.
So if we get a motion, then we can get discussion. Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Collier to go ahead and approve the agreement. Do we have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Vance. Is there any discussion? Questions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Looking ahead for our meetings, is there any agenda items that the board members or district staff would like to add for upcoming meetings?
Madam Chair, I talked to Guy at the beginning of our meeting about the results from the county on our evaluation, and you're expecting a report still, right, Guy, from the county? And I'd like that to be on the agenda once you get that so that we can review it. That'll relate to that data will be used to calculate the levy will be set, right?
Yeah, and I would expect we would have that by the 28th, so we could probably put that on the work session. Maybe a good follow-up to the audit
those things on the work session agenda already. The audit report plus the supplemental and plant facility levy discussion. And so if that can fit underneath the levy, then we'll just go ahead and have a report on that there. And wondering, I guess, if there's any other things that needed to be added to that specific work session, we could try and keep it at a minimum because we're going to try and finish up the superintendent evaluation stuff. So we could throw those on future meetings if there's anything more than, I already know Scott Miller had an item on there as well, which I'm good with. I think we're pretty full. So if there's anything else that comes up, I guess we'll try and figure out what we need to do. But I just really wanted to finish up the other stuff. Is there anything else? Any other items? Scott, please. All right. We would need a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Dan, seconded by Mr. Jenkins. Should we call for discussion on whether or not we should adjourn? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned.